Hey friends, it's Jessie. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another update for my A to Z project pan. Y'all, I am so excited to share today's update. We have some good progress and a new roll-in, so let's go ahead and dive right in. For any of my fellow Swifties, I went and saw the Eras tour in theaters, as one does, because I had to relive the best day of my life, obviously, and I was given this cute little poster that I put in my background, so everyone can say hello to Mother Taylor. She is beautiful and she's here to stay. Let's go ahead and dive straight into today's update. So we're going to start with letter N, which comes from my Jeffree Star Banana palette. The shade I've been working on is Never Bitter, which is this really pretty gold with kind of like a green reflect. I've used Never Bitter 6 times since my last update for a grand total of 16 uses in the project. And as you can see, we have hit a beautiful shiny pan in the middle of that shadow. Let's see if I can reflect it just right for y'all. There it is. I am so proud of this. And I know y'all are gonna be proud of me too, because Jeffree shadows are extremely difficult to hit pan on. I've panned several of them through my panning projects over the past couple of years, and they do not get any easier. They are still super tough. But for whatever reason, the texture of these shimmers in this palette are a lot softer than the shimmers in other palettes from Jeffree. So I feel like it took me less time to hit pan in Never Bitter than it normally does for me to hit pan in his shimmer shades. But I am really proud of how this palette is looking now. I remember reviewing this palette when it came out, and just to see it looking a lot more loved a year later is just insane to me. So super happy with how this palette is looking as a whole. I primarily used Never Bitter in 2 different ways. So the first was as an all over lid shade. That gave me a little bit more use in the shadow because it did take more product. I would just take a flat packing brush and put that all over my lid. But the second way I used this shade, and I'm pretty sure I used it a little bit more this way, was actually as an inner corner highlight. I've been using my ABH Soft Glam as my unofficial Pan That palette this year, and this as an inner corner when I used that palette looked stunning. So that is how I used Never Bitter. I'm sure you will see from the look photos that I did try and use it in a few different ways, but we are rolling out letter N, and that is very exciting to me. So let's go ahead and move on to the next shade. The next shade I have to share is letter P, and that comes from my BeautyBay Dark Fantasy palette, and the shade I've been working on is this top minty green shade Plasma. I've used Plasma 2 additional times since last update for a grand total of 3 uses in the project. And as you can see, we're not looking too different. It's definitely looking like it's been a little bit used, but we're not seeing any significant dips, any significant progress. But these shadows, the BeautyBay shadows, are not too hard to hit pan on, so I'm not too worried about not having a ton of use on this shadow because I feel like as a whole, it is not going to take me very long to hit pan. I can't remember exactly how I used Plasma, but I do know both times I used it, I did all green looks. And if I'm thinking about it correctly, I would have used Plasma to diffuse some of the green shades that I used. So that is how I've been using Plasma. We're sitting at 3 uses. It's not the best, but we're definitely making progress nonetheless, and I am happy just in general with how this palette is looking because I have also reached into some of these other shades in this palette as well. Up next, we have letter Q, which comes from my Disney Midnight Masquerade palette. This palette has been a long-time favorite on the channel and in panning projects. We've panned 2 shades in this palette already, and for letter Q, we've been working on Quasimodo, which is this beautiful, deep, rich brown shade at the bottom. I've used Quasimodo an additional 9 times since last update for a grand total of 20 uses in the project so far, and we have not hit pan yet, but we are looking a lot more loved. I've primarily used this as a deepening up outer corner shade. I will take more of a precision blending brush and use this to apply just the slightest amount to my outer corners, but it is starting to look a little bit more loved. I'm gonna try and angle it without blaring the sun in your face, but we are starting to form a little bit of a dip. We're not quite close to pan. As you can see from the 2 shades we've already panned, these are a little bit deeper, so we are not quite at panning level, but we are working towards it. and I'm happy with the amount of use that we have gotten out of this shade so far. 20 uses with no pan. I feel like I'm definitely getting my money's worth out of this palette with how deep the pans are and how much product are pressed into it. But Quasimodo is quite an easy shade to work into look, so I'm not too worried about hitting pan on this one either. Moving right along, we have this big palette. This is my Jeffree Star and Shane Dawson Conspiracy palette, and the shade we've been working on in this palette is this white shimmer in the corner, Ranch. Ranch like the dressing. I have used Ranch 8 times since rolling it in last update for a grand total of 8 uses in the project, and you can definitely see where I've been concentrating my brush in this shade. I've used it exclusively as an inner corner and brow bone highlight shade, and you can definitely see I've been working towards kind of the top point of the star embossing. It's definitely looking pretty loved. It did have a lot of use on it prior to me rolling it into the project, but you can definitely tell that there is more wear to this shade now that I've been focusing on it. And I do feel like we can hit pan. These are these square pans, which are different from the octagon pans in the banana palette that I shared at the beginning. And these are also a different formula. They're a bit more powdery, not as soft and malleable. So I do feel like it is going to take us more uses than it did with the Banana Fetish palette, but I do think that we will get there nonetheless with Ranch. So this has been super easy to work into literally any type of look. I could do any color eyeshadow and then just pop it in the inner corner because it's literally a true white shimmer. It is my favorite inner corner highlight shade at the moment. It's so easy to work into any look, so I'm not worried about use on this one either. I know that sounds like a broken record, but we are making some steady progress, and I'm still proud of accomplishing one pan nonetheless. And the last shade in our current rotation comes from my Urban Decay Naked Heat palette, and the shade I've been working on is Sauced. This is the shade Sauced. Super easy to put into any everyday look. I literally just pop it on a fluffy blending brush all over the crease, and we are good to go. I've used Sauced 15 times since rolling it in last update for a grand total of 15 uses in the project. We are not close to pan yet, but as you can see, we are making a lot of progress. I've already panned 2 shades in this palette, so we are working on our 3rd, and we are getting there slowly but surely. I know a lot of people find Urban Decay shadows to be a little bit tricky. I personally don't feel like they are as hard as, say, the Jeffree Star formula, or maybe even the Natasha Denona formula. They're pretty easy for me to work through. It does take quite a few uses, but I don't find it very difficult, if that makes sense. But we are looking loved. You can see where I have a dip forming in this shade. I've been using the shade literally all the time as a quick 2 shadows and done look. When I go to work in the morning, I don't usually feel like doing a full glam, so I will do just a couple quick neutral eyeshadows in my crease and call it a day, and then I'll come home after work and put on my fun makeup for the day. Like today, we're doing a little bit more colorful. So that is how I've used Sauced. 15 uses, we're getting there. Like I said, we are not quite close to pan, but I can guarantee by next update we will be a lot closer to pan in some of those other shadows. So with that being said, my friends, we have one new roll in this update. We're going to be rolling in letter T from the alphabet. Can you believe we're almost towards the end? And to help pick my letter T shade, I actually enlisted in the help of my wonderful husband. I gave him 3 to 4 options to choose from, and he ended up making the final decision as to which shade that I was going to work on for letter T, and that comes from my Colourpop Sailor Moon Pretty Guardian palette. They recently came out with like the sequel collection to this palette, but this is a tried and true goodie for me. The shade we chose is Tuxedo Rose, which is this bright and beautiful rosy coral shade at the bottom here. It is a very light matte. I haven't pulled this palette out in quite some time, but I do remember using this palette a lot right after I got it, and this palette was really good for a light wash of color. I'm not expecting any mind-blowing pigment from this shadow, just something a little bit light, so I may combine this with my Project Level Up palette or even some of my Pan Those eyeshadows to get my uses, maybe as a blending out shade, or even if I want to try and do just a wash of color for my quick and simple everyday work look, I can do that as well. So I'm very excited to share the progress that we make for next update. But that is today's update, my friends. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. If you do like panning content, I highly suggest you hit that subscribe button because I upload at least one panning related video every single week, as well as other eyeshadow and makeup related content throughout the month. So I highly suggest hitting the subscribe button if that is kind of your vibe. It's my vibe, so let me fuel your panning obsession. And with that, my friends, I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye!